Make your presentations pop using transitions and animations in Microsoft PowerPoint 2010. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about here are the definitions. And I'll start with transitions. A transition is how we get from one slide to the next slide. Okay, that's exactly what a transition is in sort of the world of film. And there's times when PowerPoint sort of mimics that behavior, and this is one of those times. In film, we have transitions from one scene to another. It could be a fade out, or it could be a dissolve. And in PowerPoint, we have those same types of transitions, although there's also some great new ones as well. And that's simply how we get from one slide to the next. Now, animations are how we deal with or bring in individual elements on a slide. Or it could be how they exit as well. It doesn't have to be how they enter. It could be how they exit. Or even just for emphasis. But the bottom line is a transition is how we get from one slide to another. And an animation is how we deal with individual elements or animate individual elements on a slide. Okay? So that's what we're going to be working with here. Let's go ahead and apply some slide transitions. Now, I could do that here. I could simply go to my Transitions tab and start to add transitions. And certainly I could. Let's say I want to add a fade. I'm just going to go ahead and click Fade. And sure enough, it shows me what that fade will look like. I'm going to go back and choose None. However, there's another area where we can add transitions, and I think it's a better choice to do it in a different view. I'm going to go back to my first slide, or up to my first slide. And I'm also going to go into Slide Sorter View. And actually, it doesn't really matter too much if I went to my first slide or not, because as soon as I go to Slide Sorter View, I can see all of the slides I have. Now, this is a fairly small presentation here. You can see I only have 6 slides, but that'll be plenty for what we're working on today. So now, if I come in here and choose Fade, we can see the fade happen, but also notice that we have a small star at the bottom here indicating that a transition has been placed on this slide. Okay, so if you're going through your presentation going, well, I think I put a transition on here. Well, I know I put one on there. I don't know if I did one here. It's really easy to tell if you're in Slide Sorter View, because every slide that you've added a transition to will have that little shooting star there. Okay, and then you can look up at your Transitions tab, and I can see that Fade is highlighted. So indeed, I have the fade transition here. Now, if I wanted to do fade between all of these, I could just simply come over to the right-hand side of my tab and choose Apply to All. Now that I've hit Apply to All, you can see that I have little shooting stars for all of my slides. Right? And in some ways, we could actually end this this session right here. Right? Using fade. Fade is actually a great transition. We have it between all of our slides. Thank you very much. Right? But there's a lot more to this, and we're going to play around with that and see what else we can do with it and look at some of our other options. Fade is a very good sort of classy transition, simple. It doesn't detract too much from your presentation, but that doesn't mean we can't or shouldn't use other options as well. Okay, so I'm going to go back in here and overwrite these transitions. It doesn't really matter that they're in there. I could go ahead and choose None for each of these, but instead of that, I'm just going to add in some new transitions here. Now, the transitions that I'm pulling from are in this transition style gallery. Now, if I hit the drop down arrow here, I can sort of go to the next row, but I can also hit this more button here below the drop down arrow. And when I choose that, I get to see all of the different transitions, and there's a lot here. Now, the downside is I can't really see what's going on behind my drop down. So yeah, maybe you want to not do it this way, right? It's really up to you. Just want to show you that that is an option. So to put this into action, I'm going to click on my second slide. I'm going to hit the drop-down arrow here and look at some of my other options. Now, in 2010, we have some really snazzy kind of hip new transitions. And I'm going to try one of those out. I'm going to try out honeycomb. So I'm going to click honeycomb, and you can sort of see in my little slide there sort of what's going to do, a little preview of that. We'll take a look at that in just a second. Right? I'm going to click on my third slide. And for this one, I'll try out ripple. Well, that's pretty nice for a spa. I kind of like that. So I'll choose that one for my spa here. And I'll click on my fourth slide. And you can see that really there's no right answer here, right? It's simply sort of what's going to work for you. So there's also shred. Let's go ahead and see if shred looks good for the restaurant. Yeah, maybe. That might be a little bit much. It's really, about, your presentation and what fits for it. I've actually done train the trainer sessions, and when I do the train the trainer sessions, one of the things I tell people is that people sometimes use PowerPoint as a crutch. But really, that's not sort of the intended purpose of PowerPoint. PowerPoint should augment what you're doing. It shouldn't detract from what you're doing. And if you have a lot of crazy transitions and animations, then people are going to go, "Ooh, geez, I wonder what the next one is." Or, "I had no idea PowerPoint could do that." Yeah, well, if people are thinking about that, they're not thinking about your presentation. So you're actually not doing yourself or your information or your audience a service by getting too clever. However, there will be points where all of these, even some of these bigger, crazier ones, have a perfect place in your presentation. Okay, so that was the shred that I put on the restaurant. And I'm going to come over here to my my chart here. And let's see which one I'm going to do for this one. I think I'm going to go ahead and choose cube. There we go. And I'm going to click on my last slide, and I'm going to do something a little bit more simple. I might actually just do a reveal. Okay. So those are transitions. And again, you can just sort of throw transitions in and be done with it. You can also decide that your transitions should have a little bit more flair or pizzazz or just style to them, or a little bit different look. And really, what that's doing is coming over to your tab, and we have effect options. And so we have a fade, and we can choose smoothly or through black. So if I choose smoothly, it just sort of fades smoothly. If I go through black, it goes through black, right? That's sort of straightforward. Now I also have a duration box over here in the timing region. And if you want, you can keep your timing as they all arrive, but I'm going to sort of bump that up to a 1.5 seconds. All right, I think I like that better. So now I have a 1.5 seconds fade here. And by the way, I had this clip art task pane on the right. I was at the last minute, I decided I wanted to add another picture in. I don't really even need that, so I'm going to close out of that. Now let's click on our second slide. And the second slide is this honeycomb. And the honeycomb happens over 4.4 seconds. It's actually kind of long duration, right? If I can click on it again, and we can sort of see it all goes and comes back in. Well, maybe I want that to just be in 3.5 seconds, right? You can see it just all happens a little bit quicker. Right? So you can come into all of these, and then my ripple takes 1.4 seconds. I really like this ripple, so I'm going to bump this up a bunch and make it about 4 seconds of ripple just to sort of see that. And by the way, I'm just clicking on the same transition up here in my tab to sort of trigger it again. Really sort of easy way to check it out. I can also look at my effect options here for the ripple. There's from the center, from bottom left, bottom right, or top left. And I could try from bottom left and see if I like that. Yeah, that actually looks pretty good. I think I like that from bottom left. So that's another sort of option that we have here with transitions. Right, in my shred, I can look at my shred options, strips in, strips out, particles. What does it look like with particles? That's a lot going on. And again, I'm going to make that 4 seconds also. My cube I kind of like, but I really want people to sort of linger on that cube, so I'm going to go with 2 seconds on the cube just to give it a little bit longer duration. in my reveal. Now the reveal, there's smoothly from right, smoothly from left, through the black. Now through black from right, this is sort of similar to a fade, but essentially what it's doing is it's doing the reveal and a fade through black in the same transition. Yeah, okay, I'll leave that. So now I have tweaked all of my transitions, and I have transitions in there for all my slides. And that's really kind of what there is to transitions. You can see that there is a sound if I want to do a sound along with it. Yeah, that's sort of one of those bells and whistle things that you can do in PowerPoint. Again, it's one of those things that I don't really love to sort of aim people at. Also, I had sort of mentioned that I come up here and click the transition here in the tab. You can also hit the preview button at the front of your tab as well. Just another way of doing it. Okay, so that is slide transitions. Let's go ahead now and take a look at our animations. Now, animations are for individual elements, so while I love to be in the slide sorter view for dealing with transitions, being in the slide sorter view for animations really makes no sense because I'm trying to get to specific elements on my slides, and I can't do that from slide sorter view. So it does take some sort of bouncing in and out to do your transitions and your animations. So I'm going to go back to my normal view, click on my first slide. I actually have to scroll up so I can actually see my first slide. And I'm going to go to the Animations tab. Now the Animations tab, notice all my options here are grayed out. They kind of go, well, you know, whatever. I don't know what you're trying to do. Because it's related to a specific element. As soon as I click on an element, then you can see that it does come in, right? And I can even add in an animation to an image, right? And in fact, maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll, you know, and this is where you need to sort of think about this artistically and what you want to have on the slide when it comes up and how you want to add stuff. And I sort of had a passing thought that maybe I would have the image of the desert here throughout, and what I would do is just go ahead and have the title and subtitle pop in afterward. Certainly that could work, but instead I think I want the name of the spa up there all the time, and I want the image to pop in. And just like we did with our transitions, we have a gallery of animations, and you can actually hover over these and get a live preview. And you can see there's a bunch of different styles, right? And once again, there's other different ones here. You can sort of keep testing them out. And this is a spa, so I don't want some of these really fancy like boom ones. You know, that doesn't really do me any good at all, right? So what I would probably do is look in here for sort of a more subtle type of animation. Right, darken, yeah, desaturate, grow, shrink, spin, yeah, okay. They're all here, but I don't really want a lot of these. The complementary colors, that's inline colors, this doesn't even apply to this. So what I would probably do is simply, oh geez, I don't really like the random bars either, the wheel. Probably go with the shape, I guess. There we go. And once again, I have effect options, so I can click on the effect options, and I do think I'd rather have it come out. And right now it's coming out in sort of a circle or oval shape. Let me try the box. Let me see how that looks. Well, that went box in. Let's try box out. Yeah, I guess I'll go with that. And one of the things I do want to stress here, and I didn't talk about this yet, but it's really important, I think. You should be doing this the way that this session is run. Notice I am not adding pictures or adding text or adding slides. I have a complete presentation. Your presentation should be able to stand on its own without a single transition or animation installed or used. Where the transitions and the animations come in is to sort of augment specific areas and sort of make it flow or move more easily from one thought to another. That, in my opinion, is really sort of how transitions and animations should work. We've probably all been to presentations, and you may be sitting there nodding your head right now, thinking, yeah, I've been to presentations too, where people just do so much with transitions and animations that it actually at some point starts to detract. So again, that's the thing we don't want. Okay, so I've done my little shape. And again, also, as I click on this, I have shape here, right, for an animation. And I do have also the duration. This is at a 2-second duration right now. And I'm going to bump it up to 3 seconds, and we'll preview that. Yeah, I kind of like that. So there we are. So that is a simple animation. Now, animations also can work a little bit differently. I'm going to click on my second slide here. And for this one, I'm going to click on this text box. So this text box, I can also do an animation, and watch as I choose appear or fade. Well, look at this. When I choose fade, PowerPoint knows that this is a bulleted list. And I did this through PowerPoint's list formatted slide. So when I created a slide, I chose a slide that had text and content. And the content that I chose was a bulleted list, or the content that I created was a bulleted list. If you just sort of come in here and start typing a list just by creating a text box, PowerPoint may or may not know to treat these as individual items. I really can't stress enough that, I already sort of gave you the big rule. Do your transitions and animations when your presentation is complete. The other big rule is work with PowerPoint, not against it. There's all those great formats that they give us for slide layouts. Use them as they exist. Feel free to tweak them, move the components around. You can get funky with it, but at its heart, work with PowerPoint, not against it. So again, when I come to float in now, all the options float in. And I actually like this float in. I think that sort of works. This is a slide that has these sort of bubbles or nice sort of bokeh, which is a term for sort of for out of focused sort of light bubbles, if you will. So I'm going to go ahead and choose float in for that. Okay, and once again, when it's finished here, I can come to effect options and see there's also float down. I don't really want float down. I want these bubbles to float in. And you can see that as one object brings them all in, and all at once, well, that's the same thing. And by paragraph is the one that brings them in separately. And I do like that. Now, you're seeing them come in successively one after another. This is another very, very, very important thing to note with animations. These will have to be manually clicked to go through. So if you're doing a presentation, you'd talk about gourmet restaurants, and then when you're ready, you would advance however you would advance your slide. I usually use my right arrow key, but you could also use your space bar or your mouse, whatever you like. But however you would normally advance a slide, you would click that to get you from the first element to the next. They're not just going to sort of come in one after another. We can set it to do that. That's a custom animation option, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. But as they come in, as they sort of exist by default, it will not perform that way. Okay. So now we've added just a sort of basic animation scheme here. Notice that it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 next to my bullets. That's not going to print. That's not going to show up in my show. That is just a visual cue to me, the PowerPoint user, that I have added animations into this slide. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and do another couple ones. I'm going to come down here and click on the my restaurants. And I used float in, and I am kind of inclined to use sort of similar ones here. This wipe is very, very fast. The split shape. Yeah, this actually isn't so bad. Maybe I'll go with, and I use shape for an image. Now I can use it for text as well. I'm okay with that. That's good. And we'll get to sort of some of the other ones in just a second, but this is sort of, yeah, that gets us started with some animations. Now let's look at some of our custom options or customized options. I'm going to come back up to my first slide. And what I did at first was just sort of added these basic animations here. But now what I want to do is I want to get a little bit more tricky with my elements here. I have an animation already on this image, and I want to add in some other ones. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on Natural Escape Resort and Spa. And I'm just going to go ahead and just choose something really sort of subtle. And unfortunately, PowerPoint doesn't always do subtle really well. The appear, fade in. Yeah, I'll do a float in for this. And now I'm going to click on Ojai, California, and I'm going to do a float in for that just because I feel like they should look similar. So now I have 3 animations on this slide. We can see that because we have our little 1, 2, and 3. But they're not really working the way that I would like them to work. So I'm going to go ahead and come up to my tab and choose Animation Pane. And when I click Animation Pane, I can see that now I have an animation pane on the right-hand side of my screen. But inside of that, I can see the individual animations that I've added to this slide. If I want to play it, I can click Play. And it should play. Here we go. So basically it runs through them. And right now these are all running sort of one after the other. And I can, by the way, if I click on each of these and look up at my tab, these are the parameters for each one of these. So my picture is coming in 3 seconds. Then my Natural Escape Resort and Spa is coming in a second. And the Ojai, California is also coming in a second. Now, what if I want Natural Escape Resort and Spa and Ojai, California to come in at the same time? Well, I'm going to click on Ojai because it comes after it. And then I have a little drop-down arrow here. And I can choose Start with Previous. Right? Now let's go ahead and play this. Okay, that's starting to look a little better. Now, I also, by the way, I can do that here by hitting the little drop-down arrow, right? But notice, too, in my tab, there's a start box up here and a drop-down arrow. So I like using this animation pane. I like being able to see all the different elements and sort of get a sort of linear sense of them. But if you do want to make these changes just up in your tab, you can just make those changes in your tab as well. So what I'm going to do now is I think that I'm going to try this out. We'll sort of see. I'm going to come in here and make the Natural Escape Resort and Spa also start with Previous. Now let's play this. And you may decide, okay, that's just a little bit too much. In fact, let's just go ahead and take a look at it. We can see that both animations take place at the same time. And because they sort of take a lot different time and duration, and I kind of like the duration of each, so I can come back down here and really just go, no, we're going to just choose Start on Click. And then we can play it again. And there we go. Reminder again, just to sort of come back to the same point, because I've seen a lot of people in the classes that I teach do this. Even though when I hit play, they all come in at the same time, this is where that, you'll see the actual results may vary kind of thing. Well, your actual results will vary. It's playing just to show me how they would come one after another. But remember, the triggers for these are clicks. The trigger for the picture, on click. The trigger for Natural Escape Resort and Spa, on click. The only one that doesn't have that trigger is Ojai, which is just coming with the previous one. Okay. We could, though, if we wanted to, here's another way we could do this. If we want this to sort of come in right on its heels, as it were, what we could do is actually set this up to be a little bit more automatic. And I'm going to come here and choose this drop down, and I'm going to say Start After Previous. Now look how my timeline has changed, and it sort of goes, okay, the picture happens, and as soon as the picture ends, this will go. So now it should all sort of run together better. So I would click once to launch the first animation, and as soon as the picture was done, the other two would come in. And again, in our preview mode, it doesn't look that different, but we could see that. By the way, if you ever want to test these, let's go ahead and test this out. I'm going to come over to my slideshow tab and choose from beginning. And I just hit my button once. Here comes my picture, and it's immediately followed by Natural Escape Resort and Spa. I didn't have to click it a second time. I just did it that one time. So that's my little test to see how it's going to look. And when I'm done, I simply hit the escape key, and that takes me out of my presentation and back in just good old-fashioned PowerPoint. So I kind of like this iteration of changes that I've made. So I'm going to leave it at this. However, I do want to point out a couple other things in the animation pane before we leave it. I did this in the correct order. I want my picture to come in, then the Natural Escape Resort and Spa, and then the Ojai, California. But if I did want the picture to be at the end, I can click on the picture and notice I have reorder buttons down here at the bottom. So one of the things that I could do is actually come down here to the bottom and drop it down. And I'll just sort of do that to see what that looks like. And now you can see the picture is the second animation in the list. When I click it again, it's now at the bottom of the list. Okay. And I actually want it back up at the top, so I'll use my same reorder buttons and click it up once and then twice. So that's a little bit with reordering animations as well. It's good stuff, good stuff. So that's a little bit of animations, and now also a little bit with custom animations. And I'm going to come back over to, I'm going to come back to my restaurant slide. I think this is one that I'll try it on. And here, let's go ahead and I'm going to use my slideshow from current slide. I'm just going to click that. And we can see that restaurants comes in. And then we have the Shady Glen Grill, the Bistro du Soleil, and Luis's Bakery. Now, I have an issue with these bullets. These bullets actually look like O, so it actually looks like O Shady Glen Grill. So it looks like an Irish health food restaurant as opposed to just Shady Glen Grill. But other than that, there we are. So that's how it's going to come in. But notice restaurants was already on the screen. So because there's no animation element for restaurants, it's just sort of sitting out there on its own at the beginning of the slide. So in this instance, what I'm going to do is come ahead and click on restaurants and go back up to my animations tab. And I'm going to find a nice animation for this. And I'm hitting my drop down because I really want to sort of see all of these. Now, notice that there's about, 12 or 14 maybe entrance effects, and then I have emphasis effects and also exit effects. Exit effects obviously will cause it to leave the screen. We've just done entrance effects so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click more entrance effects. And when I click more entrance effects, you can see that they're grouped under basic, subtle, moderate, and exciting. Right? So what I'm going to do is come in here and I'm going to slide this over to the right a little bit. And maybe I want to choose dissolve in. And again, I get that sort of preview here of what it's going to look like. Or circle. Yeah, that's okay. Diamond. I can sort of pick one of these that I like. A lot of my, unless I'm looking for something very specific, most of my transitions and animations come from sort of this basic. So I'm going to go ahead and let's see. Sometimes subtle, right? Fade I use. Zoom, zoom isn't so subtle. Swivel really doesn't seem subtle to me. And somehow basic zoom is under moderate and regular zoom is under subtle. I don't know exactly how the grouping sort of works, really. And actually, that might be a good one. I like that float down. I kind of like that. So I'm going to choose float down and click OK. Now, the float down happens in a second. I'm going to change my duration up here in my tab to make it 1.5. That's pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is notice here, well, geez, this is actually happening afterwards. So let's go ahead and play this. If we actually start at the top here and play this, my 3 restaurants come in, and then at the end it says restaurants. So, of course, this is going to be reordered, right? And I showed you how to reorder down here at the bottom of your animation pane. But up here in your animations tab, there's also a move earlier. So I just clicked move earlier, and that bumped it above my content. Now, one thing I also want to point out here, because this was set up as a content slide, right? Same as my amenities earlier. Notice over here on the right-hand side of my animation pane, it only takes up one space, right? And if I want, I can click to expand the contents. I can see them individually. I'm going to collapse them. But by default, they'll sort of come in as one entity because they really are one entity. They're going to fly in one at a time, but it's basically treating that entire text box the same way. Okay. So that's a little bit with just sort of customizing our animations. Let's go ahead and play further with our animations. I'm going to click on this photo here. And we already sort of did some basic, just sort of bringing it in different ways. But what I'm going to do is actually come down to more motion paths. And our motion paths, these options here are kind of interesting. And I'll show you where they are again so you can find them. But if I click on football, for instance, you can see it sort of moves around, or parallelogram. This will actually follow that. Right? Or square. Right? And, maybe I really want this or don't want this for this. I just want to show you there's the funnel. I really don't want the funnel. That's way too busy for, for a spa. But there's a bunch of these options here, right? There's also the beam here, a little bit more subtle. Right? There's a whole bunch of different ones that you can see in here. So you can have it sort of move around in kind of whatever way you want. In the arcs, that might be sort of nice. And I'm not really sure I want any of these here. I thought it seemed like a good idea to add one of these, but they really kind of all are pretty busy for this. There are some good times to use this. I actually used, I think it was the spiral one with a bee. I put a picture of a bee on a slide, and then it looked like, a bee like the little insect bee, and it looked like it was sort of flying around the slide. So something like that could work. If you have a little circle, you could sort of use neutron and have it actually sort of make it look like it was sort of going around in a neutron. I guess maybe that's good. But there you are. So these are sort of motion paths, and they have a place as well. I'm going to cancel this, but I do want to show you where to find those again, just in case if you ever need that. You can click down here in your gallery and choose more motion paths, right? Or you can also go to Add Animation, and you can see that you have those there as well. Okay. In Microsoft Office, there's usually about 17 ways to do everything. So if you have a way that you've seen any of these things done that you like better than the way I've shown it, great. Keep going with that. If you look at this and go, oh, I was doing that a different way, and I like this way, great. Use this way. It really doesn't matter. Okay. So those are some of our other animation options. Now, what I'm going to do with this slide here is tweak it up in a little different way. I didn't really like what I did with it before, but I am going to use it in a slightly different way. So I have this picture highlighted. I'm going to sort of copy it and paste it and put it pretty much right on top of the other one. Right? You can see that they're right on top of each other now. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to come up now to my picture tools format tab, and I'm going to give this sort of a really kind of fun different look. Let me maybe I'll go with sort of almost a colorized black and white, and beyond that maybe I'll even give it sort of an artistic effect. Yeah, we'll go with something like this. Now what I'm going to do is this will actually appear like this on the screen. And what I'm going to do here is come up to my animations, and this time I'm going to choose an exit effect of fade. And we'll play that so you can see it again. Now when I play it, there you go. It sort of comes into being the photo. Okay. Good. I'm going to go ahead and make the duration of this just a little bit longer. So now when I hit play, come on, play, there we go. It slowly goes into the photo. And that even might not be slow enough. I want it to be really sort of subtle. Someone watching this to sort of look at this kind of odd image and have it really sort of slowly turn into a photograph. There we go. I think that 5 seconds seems to work. Okay, so that is a sort of more custom animation. This really isn't sort of how it's intended to be done, but you can do it that way. Now there is, I'm going to go up to the slide here and click on this. We do have an emphasis that there should be a desaturate in here somewhere, yeah. So if you use the desaturate, it should actually try to make it black and white, although it doesn't look like it's actually trying to do it to this. Yeah, I would actually do the same thing that I just did as opposed to trying to use the desaturate, because it actually isn't desaturating it. So I'm just going to go in here and remove that because it isn't working the way I wanted it to. Okay. All right, good. Okay, so that is sort of a custom animation, sort of more advanced animation. And again, to get this look here, all I did was take a very simple animation that we did before, the fade, and I used an exit fade to get a very, very different look. Okay. Now let's take a look at applying our animations to our charts and also SmartArt. I'm going to start with a chart, and I'm going to click on this. Well, here we go. There we go. I'm going to click on my chart. And what I'm going to do now is go ahead and add in sort of a simple fade. As by now you can sort of tell that I like the fade. But I want to go in and say, you know, look, I don't want it to just bring in the whole chart. So when I go to effect options for the chart, I can see there's as one object. But if I choose by series, I can see it pop in that way. That's kind of nice. So now let me do that and trigger that again. I can see the golf magazine, then golf world, and then relaxing vacations come in. And if I do by category, I can see that come in as course quality, atmosphere, and then services. And then by elements and series, well, that may be more than I want, right? But you can see all the different options in here. And I think I want it to be by category, so I'm going to choose by category. But again, we just have some really nice options here for making this all happen, right? And you can see that our duration is half second. I think half second is just pretty quick for a lot of transitions or animations in this case. So I'm going to make this animation just pop out a little bit longer, make it a minute instead of the half minute. I'm sorry, a minute. Make it a second instead of the half second. A minute would be a long animation or transition. All right, now we can do the same thing with our SmartArt. I'm going to click on the SmartArt down here. And once I have the SmartArt selected, once again, I can choose, I'm going to choose float in this time. And by default, it will float straight in. If I go to my effect options, there's float up and float down. I can choose float down. And then I can also come in here and do as one object, all at once, or one by one. And doing one by one will bring them in one at a time. And that's the one I'm going to choose. So I'm going to have them float down and choose one by one. And that's how that will happen for those. Okay. Good. Now, as we look at this again, the 1, 2, 3 comes in here on the side, so I can see those 1, 2, 3. And I notice when I click on them, it actually expands out the 3 elements in my animation pane. If you're going to be doing custom animations, I highly, highly recommend using the animation pane to sort of see what's going on. Right? And these are all happening at 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. Now, if I click on the second one and make it 2 seconds, notice now 1 second, 2 second, 1 second. So if you expand them out, you can change the timing if you want the timing on these elements to be unique. So I'm just going to go ahead and play. And sure enough, my 4-day in the middle came in faster than the 3 and the 7-day packages. So again, for specific things, you may really want that, so that may be helpful. Okay. All right. Now, the other thing we can do in here, and I'm going to go ahead and look at my effect options. And I'm just doing this for the 7-day here. If I hit the drop down and choose effect options, I get this float down dialog box here, and I can see if there's a sound. And after the animation, if I want, I can have it dim or change a little bit different color, or hide after the animation. I don't really want any of this, but these are nice options here for certain things. There's also a timing tab where I can change some of the things we've already looked at. There's on click, right? Or with previous or after previous. We'll leave it at on click. Also, there's the delay. And the delay, it will still be triggered by a click, but this is nice if you're presenting and you want to give yourself some time to walk up to the screen that it's being projected on. You can actually say, on click with a delay of 2 seconds. Click it, walk over to the screen, and then it will actually execute when you get there. Right? And we can also change up the duration. And you can see that here they give you some stock options. Up in our animations tab, we can basically choose any duration we want. But in this dialog box, they give us 5 options here. If you want it repeated, notice you can have it repeat a certain number of times or repeat until the end of the slide. And that's usually not something you want to have happen with just a regular animation, but sometimes you can have it do that. I've done that actually with multimedia stuff. You get a similar option for that. You can have it repeat till the slide's over. And also, there's the SmartArt animation tab here, and we can see that our options for that come in as one object all at once and one by one. And really, all of these options are the same as what we can do either in the animation pane or in our animations tab at the top of the screen. It's just another way of getting there. So it's really, once again, sort of what works best for you and what you think is going to sort of work for what you're doing, for your workflow. Okay, I'm going to cancel out of this. And that's a little bit. We've sort of gone through. We defined transitions and animations. We added slide transitions. We added animations. We customized animations. We did some advanced animations. And now what I want to do before we actually run this and take a look at what it all looks like when we're done is I want to add in some action buttons with built-in hyperlinks. And this is really good. What I'm going to show you is really good for self-guided presentations. So if you're going to actually have somebody at a kiosk do this, or in some other environment where you want people, training environments, this happens, where you want people to sort of click through, we can actually make it a little bit easier for people. So I'm going to come down to, let's start on my animation slide. And what I'm going to do is go up to Insert. I'm going to go to Shapes, and at the bottom I have Action Buttons. And in my Action Buttons, you can see that there's a back or previous, there's a forward or next, right? So, and there's a couple other ones in here. And I'm just going to go ahead and click on this forward or next. And I'm going to click and drag down here. And you can see I get a little box. And I'm going to slide over so you can actually see it. I get this little box with a play icon. I also get the Action Settings dialog box. And notice that by default, it has a hyperlink built in, and it will go to next slide. And you can see I could also have it go to previous slide, first slide, last slide, etc. But for that icon, I would want it to go to the next slide. So I'm going to click OK. And I could put one of these on each slide. Now this is actually kind of neat. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go to my next slide, and I'm going to choose Paste. And notice it pastes into the exact same location, which happens to be over my image here. But if this is actually just a nice little PowerPoint trick, where if you want something to be copied and pasted on the same place on each page, copy it, go to the next slide, paste. Go to the next slide, paste. And I'll go to the next slide. Well, on my last slide, I really don't want it to go to the next slide. I might want it to go back to the beginning where it would start over again. So in this case, I would go back up to my Insert tab. I would go back to Shapes. And there's this one with the little home icon. I'm going to go ahead and choose that. And click and drag the little home icon. And it's going to hyperlink to the first slide. Now, a lot of people think of hyperlinks as going to other places, the web or an email address. And certainly they can do that as well. But instead of that, we want it to go to first slide. Right? We could have it even run a program if at the end of this you wanted to have it run Excel for some reason. I don't know why we would want to, but you could have it do that. Or a macro. And you can also have it play a sound. And on mouse over, notice I didn't have it do anything on mouse over, but you can even have it so that people don't have to even click. They just hover over or run their mouse over the button, and it would take them to the next slide. That actually might be a little annoying because you may not be ready for that and hover over the button and then accidentally you're at the next slide, but it's built in here, right? And again, even though it says first slide here, we could choose another one. And if you like this button, if you want to use your action buttons to create a traditional hyperlink, if you go down to URL, at the end of this, instead of home, what I could actually have that do is go to the home page for the Natural Escape Resort and Spa. And people could go to the website and see all of our lovely packages and decide that we have the best spa ever, and they have to go see it. It actually doesn't really exist, so we'll just pretend it's the best spa ever. So I'm going to go back to hyperlink to first slide and click OK, because we'll just do sort of a basic one. And there we are. Now we've sort of added in a bunch of these sort of animations and transitions, and we added some action buttons. So let's go ahead and try them out. So I'm going to go back to my slideshow tab, and I'm going to choose from beginning. And the basic slide image faded in, and now I'm going to click once. My image comes in as well as my title. And again, it just took one click for that. Now I'm going to move my arrow key, and here comes the honeycomb. That honeycomb is just a little bit busy. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit my arrow key again, and I have to hit it individually for each of these items here as they pop in. And it's also a good thing to remember how many of these there are, because if I hit it again, let me see, yeah, there's one more. Okay. It's good to know your presentation so that you know how many times to click. Now I want to test out my action button, so I'm just going to come over here and click on my action button, and sure enough, it takes me to the next slide. I'm going to hit my arrow key, and it's that nice long 5-second fade, which actually sort of ends up looking like a dissolve, because I'm really fading directly from one image to another over the top of each other. So it actually has the effect of being a dissolve, but it's sort of a custom dissolve based on the things I wanted to create. And I use these lovely action buttons, so I'm going to click the action button again. Another one of our transitions. That's a lot of transition going on there. And of course our restaurants come in, they fly in, and then we have the circle for these. And once again, I'll use my action button to go to the next slide, the cube. And this is my chart. I click once to bring the chart up, and then I can talk about course quality, which I just clicked once. When I'm finished talking about course quality, I would then talk about atmosphere. And then once I'm finished talking about atmosphere, I would talk about how lovely our services are. Then I'm going to use my action button to go to the next. And by the way, I don't need these action buttons to go from slide to slide. This is just an illustration of one of the ways of getting through a presentation. And you can feel free to use them or not at your own will. And our packages here at the end, they're going to fly in. Again, the second one is going to fly in a little bit slower, and then the third one flies in a little bit quicker. And just for fun, I'm just going to hit the home button to see what that does, and it takes us right back to the first slide. So it actually loops us in our presentation. And that's Transitions and Animations in PowerPoint 2010.